Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I would like to invite you to listen Monday through Friday right here on Spaced Out Radio. 3 hours a night of the top stories with the top guests, ranging topics from UFOs to ETs, ghosts to Sasquatch, and everything in between. We are live every night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. So come on in and take a listen at spacedoutradio.com. Spaced Out Radio will take you out of this world.
Let's go with 6316, 8.8 for 6,000.
Got 6316, North Approach, going to maintain 3,000, number 1 for the right.
3,000, let's go 6316.
Redwood 811, going to maintain 4,000. Airport's open to box 1.
We take you higher and higher and higher. You feel it over and over. We take you higher and higher and higher. You feel it over and over.
6 Roman Carefly runway heading runway 5. Let's take off.
Check.
And we are ready for takeoff. Sit back, relax. It's time to travel with Cosmic Passport. Spaced Out Weekend presents Elizabeth Anglin's Cosmic Passport. A 1-hour warm-up of news, stories, thoughts, and ideas to captivate your mind. You can follow us at spacedoutradio.com.
Now 20 years have passed us by, and we look back and count the time. Burning like the summer sun, when the world was young. Silently staring from the ground, and 7 trumpets wait to sound.
And now, here's Our Lady of Flight, Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin.
Hello, everybody. And Anthony, are you here? Okay, I don't see any of those fancy little lines when you speak on your side of the machine, as it were. I'm just going to double check here, and it's, for some reason, it's being very, very strange. Try again, Anthony. Oh, we're on. Holy
good
cow. And for those of you who missed, and I don't know if anybody actually heard the introduction. You probably heard me, but not Anthony, but he's on with us now. And I feel a lot better. I'm a little bit nervous on what's going on. What you didn't hear was Anthony telling me that if Harold the Haunted Doll doesn't like what's going on, he will kind of come through and interfere. What exactly do you think happened there, Anthony?
Well, this happens quite often with electronics and such. I will be talking to somebody, and the subject of the doll will come up, and all of a sudden the phone will disconnect, and we'll keep calling. This might happen again. Just fair warning, it might happen again. And we'll call each other back, and the phone will just continue to get disconnected. I've had incidents where I've been talking to somebody, the subject of the doll will come up, and all of a sudden they'll hear this threatening voice literally threaten them, and I don't hear it, and it's not me. It's kind of crazy. I mean, people have talked about researching the doll online or watching a vlog, and all of a sudden their computer will crash or their phone will crash, and that sort of thing. we'll talk in more detail. Perhaps it'll become clear as we talk more about the doll, or the energy behind the doll, I should say.
Well, because I'm new and I just literally just met you, take me back to when this all started to happen in your life. It's been 15 years that you've kind of become more sensitive to things on the other side, but what exactly was the turning point for you?
Well, what happened was the whole idea of being a medium, I won't go into a whole lot of detail. That actually started in and around 1986, if I remember correctly. It was around 1986, 1985. But with Harold, what had happened was I was doing investigations of ghosts, poltergeist, apparitional activity, or at least claims of all those things, back in the 1980s, and really got into it in starting around 1989. And by the mid-1990s, I had my own group, long before it was popular to do so, and you kind of had to find out what was going on by asking, or at least I did, by asking for, does anybody, do you have any, or have you heard any great ghost stories? And when somebody would say, yeah, I used to live in this house that, and then I'd follow up like that. Well, by the time I found out about Harold, it was 2004, and my group and I were meeting one night, and I was telling them about an object I acquired from a woman, an RN, actually, in San Bernardino, California. And it wasn't really her, it was a coworker, but she had a strange incident happen. We narrowed it down to this medallion, and I was telling my group about it, and somebody mentioned something along the lines of, did anybody see the haunted doll on eBay, or the haunted painting on eBay? And I said, they sell haunted objects on eBay, because I knew about eBay. Mm-hmm. I bought collectible coins, I bought like sports cards, that sort of thing. And she says, oh yeah, they sell tons of that stuff. So I was fascinated. I went on, I was looking at the listings, and there were quite a few of them. And I became intrigued, and I was also extremely skeptical. And I'd always wanted to write a book. Hadn't written any books at that time, but I thought, what a great book. I'll call it Haunted eBay, and I'll subtitle it, Are You Going to Believe Me or Your Lying Eyes? And I literally started bidding on objects based on their story, and my idea was, if I won the object, I had a couple of psychics who worked with me, and I would hand it to them without telling them the story about, what the seller said on eBay, and see if they corroborated it, and then, run tests with like an EMF meter and take pictures and see if I can get any EVPs, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I thought I'd devote a chapter to each particular object. Like I wanted a painting, I wanted a clock, and I wanted a doll, amongst other things. And I actually had won a doll, so I really wasn't interested in getting another doll. But I saw a really interesting listing for what is now the infamous Dybbuk box, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I'd go ahead and bid on it at the last possible moment and, win the damn thing. And every time I tried to bid, something happened. It didn't work. Well, talking to Jason, who we've talked quite a bit, he's a huge follower of Harold and the goings-on with Harold. He told me that a lot of people complained that after he bid on it, nobody else could bid on it. So anyway, I lost that, and I was pretty much done with eBay. But one day I was on there, just like scanning the listings, and I saw a listing that said, eBay's most infamous haunted doll, Harold, is back. And I was intrigued, but more intrigued by the idea there was a reserve that nobody had activated yet. It said reserve still not met. And there was something about a reserve that just drove me nuts. I had to find out what the reserve was on any item I saw, for sale. So I put in a ridiculous bid, $300, thinking, it'd be a couple of $100 more than the reserve amount, and hopefully I'll get outbid. Well, the actual reserve amount was $295. I thought, what in the hell? And almost immediately, I get an email from a woman named Kathy, who happened to own the doll at the time, asking why I wanted a doll. And I was honest with her. I said, I'm really not interested in the doll. I was just interested in your reserve. And then she wrote back, I don't believe the doll is haunted. I do believe it's cursed, which I found intriguing. So I asked her, why. And so we started writing back and forth. And sure enough, I got outbid by a guy who called himself Strange Magic, Majik. And I was, content to leave it leave it at that. He outbid me at like 305 or whatnot. But he said, don't bother bidding anymore. I'll just outbid you. This doll belongs to me. Well, that got my testosterone up immediately. And I said to myself, you may win this doll, pal, but it's going to cost you. And I thought, I'll just keep outbidding this guy, and in the end, dump the auction on him, dump the doll on him for some ridiculously high amount, which I thought $305 was ridiculously high. But, let's see how far this guy wants to take it. Well, as the auction was going on, which was about 2 weeks, Kathy and I kept writing back and forth, and she was telling me some of her experiences. And to bottom line the whole thing, there was about 4 or 5 minutes left on the auction. And by this time, and because I've revealed it in my book, and it's actually public knowledge, at this point, the auction got up to like $720 for the doll. And that was my bid. I mean, he and I were the only ones bidding on it. I said to Kathy, people are probably watching this thing thinking, who are these two idiots bidding on this ugly, beat-up doll? And I thought, well, let's see how far this goes. I'll take it up to $800. He outbids me there. I'm going to let him have it. Well, with 4 minutes to go, he didn't bid again. And the auction ended, and it's a congratulations, you won. And so now I owe $720. Well, Kathy immediately writes to me and says, I'll tell you what, I know you didn't want the doll, and, you don't have to honor your bid. I'll just tell eBay that, you never paid. And I said, no, a deal's a deal. I'll send you the money. You send me the doll. And she said, I'll tell you what, you send me the money, and I'll hold it for 2 weeks. And if you decide you still want the doll, I'll send it to you. And I said, just, go ahead and send it to me. Well, 2 weeks comes and goes, and she says, I've decided I'm going to give half the money to a children's hospital and the other half to, I can't remember, another charity, but I'll go ahead and send the doll to you. And she literally put the doll in the mail, and 10 minutes later, and you can look this up on Google, the Irish Postal Service, or the Postal Service in Ireland, 10 minutes after she mails the doll, she takes it to the local post office, watches the guy put it into some bin. 10 minutes later, the entire system goes on strike. And she just knew it was the doll. Exactly.
So
I think
the doll has Irish a pedigree to it. It came from Ireland.
Well, she lived in Ireland. The guy who originally sold it actually lived in New York, and she went to New York after she won the auction from him, and she was going to an aunt's wedding, and that's when the whole legend of Harold kind of got started, because he has since admitted, and I long suspected, in fact, when I first saw his original listing that the whole thing was a bunch of nonsense. It was a complete bogus listing. And he has since admitted it was. When Kathy flew from Ireland with her fiancé to New York to go to her aunt's wedding, she picked up the doll and she showed it to her aunt. She showed it to a couple of her aunt's daughters and her aunt's fiancé, who, they're going to get married in, I think it was about a week or something. And within hours, everyone who saw that doll, their backs went out and they all had to go see a chiropractor.
Fascinating, yeah.
What happened was everybody got their backs adjusted except for the groom. He had to take his wedding vows in a wheelchair. Well, Kathy still didn't think, it has to do with the doll, because what I found out a couple of years ago was that Kathy knew it was a hoax. Admitted to me she knew it was a hoax years later, like I said, a couple of years ago. And but at the time, she, again, didn't put it together that it was a doll, but she was talking to a group on Yahoo, and somebody in the group said to her when they found out that Kathy was supposed to go to some island in the Bermuda Triangle on a cruise, but her aunt and her aunt's now husband couldn't go because her aunt now developed other physical conditions. Somebody said to Kathy, I have a great idea. Why don't you take Harold on the cruise and let's see what happens? Well, Kathy did that. She saw her bag go up onto the cruise ship along with the doll, and that was the last she saw of her baggage until she got back to New York 10 days later. For the entire cruise, nobody could find her bags. So, she had no clothes to wear. She had no shoes to wear. She missed out on most of the major activities like the balls and the captain's dinner and all that good stuff. And by the time she got back, her aunt's back started feeling better. She started feeling better. Kathy put Harold into a rental car, went back to her aunt's home, and within, I think it was like 30 minutes of getting back to her aunt's home, her aunt's back went out. She became sick again. And Kathy started thinking there's something going on with the doll. So she had it shipped back to Ireland, and she told me that her intent was to have the doll restored. I honestly don't know if I believe that or not. I'm telling you this after having told her I don't know if I believe her or not. Okay, I'm not telling you anything that if she's listening now, she hasn't heard. But she was intending to keep it, I guess, for about 3 or 4 months and then put it back up on eBay, hoping to make a profit off of it. A year later, she put it back up on eBay, and by that time, she was literally terrified of the doll and what was going on with it. So that's how I ended up with it.
When you look back, or at the time, can you, with the idea, okay, somebody's going to create a hoax around a specific doll, does that kind of open the door possibly for something to step in, or was there always something there?
I believe there was always something there after having owned it since 2004. So now we're looking at, 12 plus years, or 12 years, some months. I believe there was always something there. I think that some things did happen to the guy who sold it. He was just very creative, and he wanted to sell what he thought he might get $10 for this doll on eBay. He was hoping to get like $40 or $50 with a good story, which literally went worldwide. It went viral. The story went viral. Websites were talking about it. paranormal groups were talking about it. It was even talked about on Coast to Coast at that time because the stories were so crazy. Now looking back on it, and one of these days I'm going to sit down with the guy and have a face-to-face talk with him. Now looking back on it, I do believe some things happened. Like one of the things he claimed was that he had to go to the hospital shortly after. By the way, I'm starting to lose my voice, and I've got the chills talking about this doll all of a sudden.
Okay.
But he had to go to the hospital, and Kathy swears to me that he showed her the admittance papers to the ER. So, things like something did happen, and he just took that little bit of truth and then kind of overblown it. And we'll discuss this more because I've become much more open to it since the book has come out. I believe that something was going on with the doll probably back in the 1930s, which is when the doll, give or take, it was around 1935, 1936 when the doll was created.
Was it made in the U.S.?
Yes, it was. New York, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's a Mama's doll, Mama's composition doll. It's a huge doll. It's like 22 inches long, and it literally resembles a live baby.
Oh, and if dolls aren't creepy enough the way they are, let's make them look like a human. Oh man,
it's it.
Now, when you get this doll, and like you say, things have started to happen to you, and we'll talk about some of those things. Where do you keep it? Like, is it in a lead-lined box in a safe in a vault somewhere, or is it sitting on your couch?
For a long time it was sitting next to me, and I'll explain why. At this moment in time, it's actually in a storage unit here in Denver where I live. But quite frankly, people are constantly saying, why don't you give it in a museum? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And none of that will help. None of that will stop what's going on from going on. And, I don't know if I don't think putting it in a lead-lined box would actually do it. I don't know I have an idea. I mean, I'm working on ending this whole thing in the next couple of months, and I'll talk about that in more detail. I'm not trying to be vague. It's just such a long story. But to answer your question, again, it's sitting in a storage unit, but for a long time, literally, it would sit next to me, within feet of me, because that was the only way I could control what was going on with it.
When you say control, in what way do you have to control something like that?
Bottle of holy water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your opinion, with all the years you've had this, is the energy getting stronger or weaker, or is it just kind of in a plane? Is it just it is what it is, and it's not fluctuating?
Lately, it's quieted down. Just the past few months, it's quieted down. And I believe it's because I become much more open about what's going on. And yeah, it's such a crazy story. And there's a young boy who's autistic in Australia whom I call Vincent. It's not his real name, but he's been instrumental in helping me understand what's going on with the energy in the doll. And he recently drew a picture for me, and he said that the energy contained within the doll is getting tired of fighting the light. And so, as I mentioned before we came on the air, we've kind of taken our neutral corners at this point. But interestingly enough, come Saturday, something incredibly strange may happen. And I'm not sure what it's going to be, but it's based on something that Vincent told his mom to tell me.
And?
I'm waiting.
Okay. You're not going to tell us what that is.
I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
what's going to happen. It's just that he gave the date of September 17th, and there's actually two possible meanings to that date. But he's very artistic, and being autistic, he's moderately to severely autistic, so he's actually become more communicative lately. But when it comes to talking about the energy within the doll, I found it's best to get him to draw things. And what he did was he drew literally buildings being destroyed, and then the date, September 17th.
Interesting.
So
we'll see.
So that's coming up. Yeah, I have no clue as to what's going to happen. I really
the day
don't.
after my
but
dad's
he's
birthday.
been spot on.
He's been spot on?
He's been spot on with a number of things. The only things that haven't turned out is because of things that I failed to do on my part. But we'll talk more about that. It's probably easiest to take it from 2004 up until present day.
Perfect.
It's probably easiest to start from 2004 and bring it up to the present day.
Let's do that. In 2004, where were you? Were you still living? Were you living in Denver at the time?
I was living in Denver at the time, and that's where I was when I was bidding on the doll. Like I said, Kathy sent me the package, and so I was expecting it. And at that point in time, it was like every day was Christmas for me because I had so many things coming in from eBay. I had mirrors coming in. I had all kinds of stuff coming in. I even got plane parts from Flight 409, the famous haunted, famous plane flight that crashed. And then Eastern Airlines was putting plane parts from that plane into other planes, which every airline did. And every time they put a plane part into a different plane, the crew would report apparitional sightings and apparitional events or ghostly haunting events happening. I have plane parts from that plane crash that psychics, not knowing that that's what they are, have confirmed that that's where it came from. So anyway, my point is I was standing out on my front porch when my mailman, Greg, comes pulling up, jumps out of the car and goes, "Oh, there you are." And I said, "Yeah, been waiting for you." He says, "Well, I got a monster for you today," which, I thought he meant a huge package. So I went down to his truck, helped him lift that thing out. Turns out it was a box about 2 feet long. And I looked at the return address. It said Ireland. And I thought, well, Harold's here. But I found it interesting. He told me that he had a monster to deliver to me. And honestly, I didn't know whether to believe Kathy or not. I still am skeptical about a lot of things. And so, when I opened the box and saw Harold there, I'd grabbed a bottle of holy water. I was born and raised Roman Catholic, and I thought, better safe than sorry. So I took some pictures. I tried getting an EVP. I tried getting EMF recordings. Nothing worked. So it was just like, well, looks like I just spent $720 on what I thought it was, just a bunch of BS. But I thought, well, I'll still write about it. So I called my friend April, who is a gifted psychometrist. She can tell you things just by touching objects. She can tell you about their history and whatnot, the history of the people who owned it. So we agreed to meet, and I gave her several other things to do readings on. And when I pulled Harold out of the Dwayne Reed bag that he'd come in, she said, "Oh, you have Harold." And I said, "You know about him?" She said, "Oh, yeah, he's all over the internet." I was really thought about calling it off at that moment because I didn't want her to know anything about anything I was giving her. But I decided to go ahead and go with it. And I was recording all of her readings on all the previous objects she had done. And I kept it going with Harold. So I pull out the bag and I start spraying holy water on it. And she starts chuckling. She says, "You're spraying it with holy water." And I said, "Yeah, better safe than sorry. You know the stories." Well, she takes it and she's doing a reading on it. And it was like within 2 minutes. It seemed to me it was like a minute and a half. It was really a short period of time. I said, "Anthony, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." She handed it back. And I said, "Why? What's wrong?" She said, "I have a heart murmur and it feels like it's grabbing my heart. It just threatened to kill me." Well,
What?
I still know April. We literally talked just recently for the first time in like 5 years. But I also knew April to be a bit on the dramatic side. And I thought, well, for one thing, I never knew she had a heart murmur. As long as I've known her, she never mentioned a heart murmur. And the idea that this doll's threatening to kill her is kind of, she's going along with the story. She's bought the stories a little bit too much. So anyway, later on, I was listening to the recording, and it got to the part with Harold, and I started spraying it with holy water. You can hear me on the recording, and she says, "You're using holy water on it." And I said, "Yeah, better safe than sorry." You hear the most ungodly, agonizing scream from a male. I mean, just agonizing scream. And then he says, "Shut up, bitch." Very clear, Class A EVP. And then she's starting to do her reading. She mentions that she's getting either a molested child or a child molester. And then you hear this roar, and she talks a little bit more, and you hear her say, "He just threatened to kill me." And right before that, you hear this male angrily say, "I'm going to kill you, you bitch." And my first thought was, oh my God, there is something going on with this, at least according to the CBP. Well, I started to do my own investigation on it, and I started bringing it to other psychics who were willing to, who didn't know anything about it. And several of them, first thing they did when they just looked at the doll, refused to even touch it, first thing they would say is, "You shouldn't have this thing. It's dangerous." It's like, what's so dangerous about it? It's a doll. No, there's an energy to there. And by this point, April started calling Harold H-boy, but H didn't start for Harold.
Oh.
But that's as close as she would ever say his name. She would constantly refer to him as Hellboy. And she kept telling me, I should say, "Anthony, there's a demon attached to this doll." And at that point in time, I didn't believe in demons. And it's just like, oh, here we go with the demons again. And other people were saying, "Anthony, there's something demonic to the doll." It's like, give me a break with the demons, will you? There's a woman whom I'm still in touch with. In fact, I just heard from her on Facebook today, commenting on one of my posts about nothing to do with the doll. But I was looking for somebody who did tarot card readings. And she says, "I'll do a reading. I'll do a tarot card reading on it." And again, all this was simply for the book that I planned on writing. And I took Harold to where she worked. We sat in a conference room by herself. She knew nothing about the doll, nothing whatsoever. All she knew was that I had a doll and I wanted to write a book about it and wanted her to do a tarot card reading. And so we're sitting in this conference room, and the first thing she says is, "I'm getting something about a molested child or a child molester." And I thought, wow, you and April picking up on the same thing here. Well, turns out she really didn't know how to do a tarot card reading. But again, I was, recording the whole thing, and we started listening to it and heard the part where she mentioned the child molestation or the child molester. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see her scratching her right hand. And she says, and drops the F-bomb. And she says, Anthony, look at this. Does this look like a bite to you? And my first thought was, I saw you scratching your hand. You're not going to put anything over on me. And I said, show me your hand. She showed it to me. And there were 2 indentations between her thumb and her forefinger. And it literally looked like a bite, but teeth. Not like a bug bite, like 2 teeth. So first thing I said was, you have a ruler? She said, no. And I looked around, and there was a cup filled with stir sticks next to a whiteboard. And on the whiteboard, there was a fine point Sharpie. So I got the Sharpie, and I marked the apparent bite on her hand and held it up to the painted on teeth on Harold's mouth, and it matched exactly. And I started thinking, holy crap, maybe this is even more real than I thought. And it just went from there. It just became crazier and crazier and crazier from there.
Do you,
to bottom line, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you have any pets or children around the house or anything like that that could be harmed by this?
Actually, I didn't have any until last year. And again, that's going from 2005 now to 2015. And I will talk about that if you want to bring it up. I did have 2 pets. One has since passed away, and it is because of what happened with it is due to the doll, or the energy contained within the doll. Actually, the energy that owns the doll. And I have video proof of it on YouTube. So,
now, Anthony,
I don't have children.
Do you have your own YouTube channel?
I do.
What's it called?
I think it's called Haunted Harold.
Haunted Harold.
So
okay.
If you punch in Haunted Harold or Harold the Doll on YouTube, you'll see a string. I actually started this channel 2014. So let me go back to 2005 real quick.
Yep.
Because things were happening to people, just crazy things. People were constantly writing me saying, I saw a picture of your doll, and my child immediately freaked out, saying the baby inside the doll is scared. I saw a picture of your doll and became sick. I saw a picture of your doll and got a headache. Saw a picture of your doll and my back went out. And, I'm thinking, it was the Harold hysteria, to be very honest with you. But things were happening like what happened to Diane. And somebody said to me one day, has anything ever happened to you? You've had this doll for, a little over a year now. And I said, no. And she said, why do you think nothing's happened to you? I said, honestly, it knows better. And I have gallons of holy water handy just in case. That night I was playing on my Xbox, playing a game on my Xbox. I stood up. I turned the Xbox off, stood up, and collapsed. Literally my right knee just gave out. Couldn't walk. Every time I go for a walk, I would end up falling to the ground several times. So I went to go see one of my physicians who happened to be a sports physician, and he says, what's going on? And the words that came out of my mouth were, I tore my MDL. Now, I didn't know what an MDL was. I didn't even know an MDL existed. And he looks at me and says, why do you think you tore your MDL? And I'm thinking, what the hell is an MDL? And I said, well, because every time, I walk, I fall to the ground. And he asked me, what happened? I told him I, stood up. And he said, you probably just sprained your knee. Don't worry about it. Just put a brace on it. Well, 4 months later, I kept going back to him like once a month, insisting on an MRI. And he said, Anthony, if you tore your MDL, you'd constantly be falling every time you walk. I said, well, apparently you missed that the first time we talked. So he reluctantly agreed to schedule an MRI. When he got the results back within 30 minutes, he had got a orthopedic surgeon who would be willing to talk to me. And so I called the surgeon. The surgeon took a look at my MRI and canceled his vacation to do to do surgery on me ASAP. And I had torn my MDL.
Oh.
So after that, I put the doll in storage for the first time in 2005 and kept him out of the public eye. I mean, literally didn't talk about him at all online or anything like that. And I would see things, people are like, does anybody know what happened to Harold the doll? And I wouldn't say anything. I didn't let anybody know I owned it, nothing. I just, let it go. And I thought, well, at some point, all the interest in this doll is going to die down, and, be able to do an objective investigation of the doll. So anyway, fast forward to 2013, I'm back east. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, in a motel room, and a friend of mine, LaShawn Croker, contacted me on Facebook and said, "Hey, Anthony, look what I found. It reminded me of Harold." And it was a doll she found at a flea market, which is what Greg said he found that doll was at a flea market. That was nonsense, just for the record. He never found the doll at a flea market in Webster, Florida. He told me his older brother found the doll probably at some junk store in New York City. And so, she posted a picture of it, and people started writing, "Who's Harold?" So I explained that Harold was a doll I got on eBay, supposedly haunted, and a few strange things were going on. But I didn't really go into a whole lot of detail about it. Within minutes, literally within minutes, people were writing me and private messaging me saying, "I was looking at the picture of your doll. I got headaches. My stomach started to hurt. My back started to hurt. All kinds of stuff." The craziest one was a couple of nights later, or a couple of mornings later, a woman contacted me, and she had written online, "I don't believe any of this stuff. It's just an ugly old doll, yada, yada, yada." The next morning, she private messaged me saying that night, and she lived somewhere in Illinois. I don't remember where in Illinois at this point, but she lived in this house or a cabin all by herself. She said she woke up and she could feel Harold staring at her. I wrote back, I said, "Did you actually turn around to see the doll?" She said, "No, but I could just feel its hatred towards me." And then she said eventually she got up, smudged the house, took sea salt and surrounded the house with sea salt, and then the feeling went away. And she's like, "Anthony, is this doll real?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't know. I really don't know." And she stopped talking to me because she said, "I live alone. I can't deal with this whole thing." And anyway, around that time, I started thinking, again, this is like 2013, 8 years later. And the doll had been tucked away for all that time. And I thought, well, maybe I need to go ahead and do another investigation on it. But I was in Erie, Pennsylvania. The doll was back in Denver. And I, forgot all about it, to be very honest with you. I got back to Denver, and LaShawn contacted me again and said, "Have you seen the YouTube video about Harold?" And I said, "No." So she sent me a link. I looked at it, and I'm thinking after all these years, people have forgotten about it. There were 33,000 views on that video. And I thought, what in the hell? I looked at it 2-3 days later, there were 36,000 views on it. And all the information was based on the original listing, which again was a hoax. And I thought to myself, it's time to clear this whole thing up and let people know that what the original lister wrote was just a bunch of nonsense. So I went onto her comment section, and I said, with all due respect, what you have here is wrong. I know because I own the doll. She wrote back and said, "Can you prove it?" because apparently a lot of people were claiming to have owned Harold during that time. And I said, oh, absolutely. I'll tell you what, I'll send you a picture of the doll. And I went to a gas station, got a USA Today newspaper because it had, the date in big print, went to the storage unit, got Harold out, took a picture of it with the newspaper, sent it to her. And
okay, on that, we're going to take a quick break.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I would like to invite you to listen Monday through Friday right here on Spaced Out Radio. 3 hours a night of the top stories with the top guests, ranging topics from UFOs to ETs, ghosts to Sasquatch, and everything in between. We are live every night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. So come on in and take a listen at spacedoutradio.com. Spaced Out Radio will take you out of this world.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on two mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. Two mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for news beyond the mainstream news? Head to spacedoutradio.com and check out the SOR Spacewire. This is Spaced Out Radio's Eric Markham, news director for the SOR Spacewire. Daily, I will bring you intriguing stories and outlandish reports from what's going on around the world. UFO sightings, paranormal activity, conspiracies, alternative health, and so much more. And if you have news, email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where two members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio.
For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
It's time to go live on Spaced Out Weekend.
13, please. Oh, hi, Kevin. Oh, is that the time? Kevin, my friend, don't you find that watch just a little bit loud? Well, I certainly hope our buddy Bumblefoot is playing when we get there. Oh, you stinky big bundle of hair. I said Bumblefoot, not Bigfoot. Oh, it's going to be a long night.
It's time to head to the 13th floor of the old log cabin for Spaced Out Weekend with James Tyson. You can tweet James at James Tyson SOR. You can find him on Instagram, Spaced Out Weekend, as well as on Facebook. On YouTube, our channel is Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can check out our website, spacedoutradio.com.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all connected but separated, misunderstood and so frustrated. A million armies of one have invaded, watching you and watching me. We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere. Watch it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
And now, perched high in his captain's chair, way above the clouds, here's James Tyson.
Hello, everybody. It is I. I am in tonight for Dave Scott, who is taking some personal time, just because it's probably Harold the Doll, and he's not going near this thing again. And we are here talking to, I was going to say my good friend Anthony, but I don't know yet. My friend Anthony Quinata out of Denver, who is the owner of Harold the Haunted Doll. And before the break, Anthony, we were going through, you were kind of laying that groundwork for where you are today, and we were just touching on the YouTube video. Can you expand on that and then bring us up to speed?
As I was saying, the young woman who her handle on YouTube is Virtual Insanity, and we've since talked several times. She's actually out of Great Britain. She asked me if I could prove I actually owned a doll, because the number of people, and you'll see things about how since it was sold on eBay, you know, people have had it and couldn't keep it, so they had to resell it. It just isn't true. I've had the doll since 2004, and nobody knew I had the doll, and quite frankly, I'd be quite content to this day that nobody would know I had the doll. But this video came out, and the first time I saw it, it had 33,000 views on it. Now I think it's right around, or it's over 200,000 views, or maybe even more, which just stunned me at 33,000. And all the information that she had about it was based on the original listing, which I, with all due respect, told her, you know, it was a hoax. And so I sent her a picture of the doll with a picture of a USA Today newspaper showing that current date next to it. And, you know, she went on her channel and said that he does own the doll. And I was literally content to leave it at that. That's literally all I wanted to do, was just to say that the information she had on the video was incorrect. That's all. It was based on a hoax. And I was going to let it go at that. And I put the doll back into storage. What was interesting was I was talking to, when I was getting the newspaper, a very good friend of mine, one of my dearest friends in the whole world. I've known her for 27 years now. Her name is Camille. We were talking on the phone, and I was telling her about the video. I was telling her I was buying this newspaper. I was telling her why. And after we hung up, I went over to the storage unit. I stopped by a Walmart on the way, thinking I was going to pick up a new lock for the storage unit. And while I was in the Walmart, I heard this voice in my head say, she'd better stay away from me from now on. Well, I had no idea who she was. So I went, got the doll out, took the picture, sent it to Virtual Insanity, and went to a Starbucks and was sitting there having a cup of coffee with the doll sitting in my hotel room at the time. And I remembered this threat. So I called Camille, and the moment she answered the phone, I knew something was wrong. And I said, are you okay? She said, no, I'm really sick. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I've just got these hot flashes, these cold chills, and I'm nauseous and I'm vomiting. And I said, well, how long has this been going on? And she said, it happened almost immediately after we hung up the phone earlier. Well, I told her, let me call you back. And I was just incensed. Got up, walked across the street, walked back to my hotel room, grabbed a bottle of holy water, started spraying water on the doll. And I was literally saying, don't you ever attack Camille or anybody else I love again. And, I stopped, and I was like sitting there thinking, could this have been? And all of a sudden I heard, again, the same voice say in my head, okay, she's okay now. And so I called her, and she sounded like her normal self. And I said, well, you sound like you're feeling better. She says, I am. And she said, all of a sudden, everything just stopped, and I'm feeling great now. And I said, well, how long ago did this happen? She says, I don't know, 3 minutes ago, which is the time I sprayed the doll with holy water. So anyway, I took the doll back, put it back in storage, and met with Camille the next day for lunch. And as we were talking, I was lifting, a fork full of food up to my mouth, and she said, what did you do to your arm? And I said, what do you mean? And she says, it looks like you scratched it. And I looked at my arm, and there was probably 7 inches. There was a gash on my arm that was bleeding, fresh blood. And I didn't feel a thing. And I said, well, I guess Harold doesn't want to be back in the storage unit. So I took it back out, and again, was literally content to let everything just die down. But I thought, well, maybe I'll do another investigation on it and see, what's going on. And then what happened was, I'm going to leave a bunch of stuff out, although if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I'd had the doll out for several months, and I kept it nearby me. And again, I started hearing things from people like, one woman said that I filmed a video of the doll and put it up on YouTube. And a woman said that her child, who I think was about 2 or 3, saw it, started crying, said the baby was sad. She tried to explain to her child that it was just a doll. He said, no, mommy, the baby in the doll is sad. And I remember thinking, I used to hear this back in 2004, 2005. Kathy heard similar stories. I wonder what's up with that. But, I started doing things with, again, EMF meters. I started trying to collect EVPs, that sort of thing. Just, for my own purposes. I really had no intention of going public with any of it, although I did film some of the things and then put them up on another channel on YouTube, which I couldn't give you the address now. And then I called a friend of mine. Her name is Debbie. And I said, I have this crazy idea, because it literally just came to me one afternoon. She said, what's that? I said, I want to take Harold to a cemetery, see if anything happens. And I said, you want to go? Because I always believe in having a witness to these things, so people can't accuse me of, making things up. So she agreed. And nothing happened for the longest time. I had an EMF meter and or a tri-field meter and a natural EMF meter, natural EM meter. And I said, okay, well, let's just call it a day. All of a sudden, the tri-field started going bananas, started becoming very erratic, and the natural EM started moving, which suggested to me something was going on, but not only something, but something intelligent was going on based on how I had been trained by Lloyd Auerbach. And so I started recording the whole thing. Again, I had a digital recorder going. We started listening to the digital recorder. And on the video I posted on YouTube, you can hear a male voice saying, they're coming to get me, or they're coming after me, is what it said. And at that moment, right before it said that, I said, whatever's going on here, the energy is like really afraid. It's scared. And then you hear they're coming after me. So I started thinking that somehow or another, what happened, whoever was in this doll, happened in a cemetery. And again, I was completely content to let it drop. But then I got this goofy idea. I would bring it to another psychic. And so I went to this bookstore where I knew they had psychics working there, because I used to work there as a psychic doing readings. And I met a young lady named Erica who lives in the Denver metro area. And first thing I said was, you know anything about this doll? She said no. And but she refused to touch it. And I said, would you give me a reading on it? And I can't remember how much money I gave her. I think I gave her $20-$30 to do a reading. And so this doll sat in this bag, and she just kept looking down at it. She said, well, I have to tell you, I don't believe that objects can be haunted. And I said, fine. So she was telling me things about it. And then I said, well, if you don't believe an object can be haunted, what are you telling me? She said, I'm just giving you the impressions I'm getting from the owner, the young girl who used to own the doll. And I said, okay. All right, fine. And yeah, I took it and went. And basically what she told me was a young girl owned it who died when she was 6 years old. And she was very attached to the doll, yada, yada, yada. Took the doll, went away. And then she called me and said, Anthony, I keep getting this feeling I'm supposed to contact you again. I don't know why, but we're supposed to get together again. And I said, Erica, do you like sushi? She said, I love sushi. I said, I happen to be staying in a hotel right across the street from a great sushi place. I'll tell you what, I'll buy you dinner if you do another reading on the doll. She agreed. We had dinner. We agreed to meet the next day. She came by the next day to my hotel room. Again, put the doll next to her. And the reason why I wanted her to do a second reading was I didn't videotape the first one. So I didn't video record the first one. So I literally wanted her to do another reading just so I could have it on video. So she's doing the reading, and I had gotten into a habit of keeping a crucifix next to the doll. And again, she was saying, I'm getting the same thing I got before. And I said, well, here, let's do this. I'm going to remove the crucifix. You tell me if you're getting anything else. I removed the crucifix, and she said, nope, no, I'm still getting, whoa. And I said, whoa, what? She said, all of a sudden I'm getting a young man and associated with this doll. And she starts telling me all the impressions she's getting, which I go to in my book. I talk about it in my book. But basically, she talked about a plantation in the South that was by a river. There was a young girl who was this young man's half-sister. He was a mulatto. His father was white. His mother was black, who was a servant. And then she said that she started describing how, the young girl and he were very close, and the young girl died from an injury to her head. She fell out of a tree, cracked her skull. The young boy got blamed for it, and his stepmother paid the local voodoo practitioner money to trap this boy within the doll. And I was like, wow, for somebody who doesn't believe objects can be haunted. And she's like, I don't know. I'm just telling you the impressions I'm getting. And then she came back and did a second reading and, elaborated a little bit more and was telling me that one day I'll find a plantation and it'll be a story. People will be familiar with the story about, this girl dying and the boy being blamed for it, but it'd just be like a folk tale to everybody. But I need to go to the plantation to find out how this happened, and once I get there, I will know how to release this boy. Okay, fine. I'm taking it all, again, as a skeptic. And I put it up on YouTube, and shortly after I put it up on YouTube, I was contacted by a woman who called herself Fiona, and she sent me an email that said, next time you talk to Harold, tell him Adele says hello. And I was looking at it and thought, Adele. And then I remembered part of Erica's reading. She said that the young girl who died had a name that started with an A and sounded like Annabelle, but it wasn't Adele, it was Audelle, 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 Audelle. Erica said it sounded like Audelle, but it was much longer. And when she said, tell her Audelle says hello, I wrote back to her, I said, well, who are you and who's Audelle? And she wrote back and said that she was on YouTube looking for country songs for her collection when she saw the thing about Harold that Virtual Insanity put up. She watched it and she immediately thought, I've been dreaming about this doll since I was about 4 years old. And I said, the reason why I contacted you is because the name you gave me is similar to a name that was given to me by a psychic. And she wrote back, does the name Aurelia Audelle mean anything? And I thought, sounds like Annabelle, starts with an A, much longer. And I said, I want you to call me, but I've got an appointment. I had an appointment to do a medium reading. So I want you to call me. I gave her my number. She said, after you're done with your appointment, call me. And she gave me her number. Well, I did my reading. I forgot all about it. An hour later, it came to me, this conversation. So I called her. She answered. I said, who are you? And what's your story? She told me that when she saw Harold, she remembered having dreams about him for years, starting from when she was 14 up until she got divorced. And she was taking anxiety medication, and that's when the dream stopped because it was helping her sleep. She couldn't sleep. And I said, well, tell me about your dreams. She started telling me details about her dreams that Erica talked about that I had not made public. And go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Oh, no. She talked about living in the South on a plantation next to a river. And there was a tire swing that her older brother, whom she called Mason, would push her on. And she said he was my half-brother. He was half black, half white. And he had the most beautiful green eyes. And she just started telling me all kinds of things that I did not reveal out of Erica's reading. I edited the video, leaving key parts out, and she was filling them in. She knew all about them. And then I said, do me a favor, stay in touch with me. And about 2 weeks later, she contacted me on Skype. We were talking. She said, I know how I died. And I said, how'd you die? She said, I fell out of a tree and I cracked my head. And I said, how do you know this? She said, well, I stopped taking my medication so I could start having these dreams again. And she said that the back of my head was covered with blood. My brother was looking down at me with his beautiful eyes saying, don't worry, I'll get you help. He carried me to this woman who was from Haiti or someplace like that, which, again, Erica told me in her reading, but I did not make public. And this woman said, this girl's going to die and her mother's going to blame you for it. And anyway, everything just jived with what Erica told me, which just totally panicked me. So I started making plans to go down south to find this plantation. And, excuse me, right about this time, Kathy got back in touch with me and asked me if I'd be willing to do an interview about the doll. Well, I'd never done a radio interview about it. And I said, well, who's going to do the interview and how credible are they? And happened to be Dave Schrader, of all people.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, fine, on one condition, Cassie. And she said, what's that? And I said, you have to admit on the air, on Schrader's show, that you knew it was a hoax. You knew the whole thing was a hoax from the beginning. And she agreed. And she asked why. And I said, because sooner or later it's going to come out that, the original seller, whom I won't name, because I can't remember what name he originally used. Oh, yeah, he used Mishka or something like that on eBay. It turns out she knew him, talking to him, when they were kids, when he was a kid. She knew him. She was friends with his older brother. And when she was bidding on it, he was saying to her, this is a bunch of bull crap. And she's like, I know, but I'm hoping to make some money off of it. I'm going to flip it, hopefully make $100 or $200 off of it. He's like, okay, but if you win it, you have to pay me. She's like, yeah, fine. So I said sooner or later, because he's admitted it on the internet, people are going to find out. And I don't want people thinking that my stories are a bunch of crap, because, that story's a bunch of crap and you knew it was a bunch of crap. And so she got on Schrader's show. She admitted it, but she also talked about her own experiences. And a couple of weeks later, I see a Facebook message from Schrader, saying he's been trying to get a hold of me. Come to find out, he texted me and left a voicemail as well. And he told me that Zach Bagans was going down to the Island of the Dolls in Mexico and wanted to take Robert the Doll with him, to see what would happen. And Schrader said to him, Dave said to him, Zach, you're nuts if you think the museum's going to let you take Robert the Doll, but I do know the guy who owns Harold the Doll. Maybe he'll let you take it down. So he says, what do you think? I said, well, let me talk to somebody with the show and I'll think about it. So I got somebody from the show, My Tupelo Productions, contacted me. First thing I said to him was, I said, I'm not saying I'm going to agree to do this, but if I do agree to do this, you have to know something. It started out as a hoax, but there's something very real going on with this doll. And if they're going to treat it as a prop, if they're going to treat it as a toy, if they're going to just, make fun of it, I don't care about myself, but I'm telling you, I don't care if they, make me look to be the biggest idiot in the world, but I'm telling you, if they don't treat it with respect, something's going to happen to one of those guys, and I can't be held responsible. And the guy's like, no, don't. They have total respect for this sort of thing. They're aware of its reputation. I said, you don't know the half of it. And I kept telling him, you have to treat it with respect, or something disastrous is going to happen. Well, I made several calls and found out, they were okay, upstanding guys. So I agreed to send the doll with them. And to be quite frank with you, when I finally saw the thing, and when I finally saw the show on air, it was quite different from what I had been told happened while they had the doll.
No, really? I've a friend of mine, David Oman, who owns the Oman House in Hollywood. Exactly the same thing. He would tell the crew and Zach and everybody, this is the history of this specific area in the house, and this is what happened here. And they would just make up something completely different that sounded a lot better.
Actually, a lot of the things that they said on that show, I was sitting there with friends with the doll, and I was like, where did they get that from? Like, if you look into the doll's eyes, you'll die from cancer or a brain tumor.
Yeah.
I was like, I never told them that, and I was livid.
Yeah.
Because I wanted the truth to come out, and they're making up all these crazy stories. And the weirdest part was the stories I gave them were scary enough. The experiences Bagans and Goodwin and the rest had literally frightened them more than you saw on television.
Yeah. It's, if you want the truth to come out, Ghost Adventures isn't the place to do it. It's like, it's turned into I don't watch it anymore. It's more of a cartoon for me than anything else. I'm a fan of the Dead Files.
For me as well.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
It is for me as well.
Yeah. Well, I could see you guys all sitting there having a beer, watching the show with Harold, and these guys saying something that's completely wrong, and everybody in the room turns and looks at Harold and like, what? What? Harold, what did you do? I
bring that up because I've been having to try to dispel those things ever since the show came out, because a lot of people get their education from television, apparently. And, they're constantly writing me, saying I'm full of crap. And it's like, but I never said that sort of thing. I will tell you this. The day before I talked to one of their producers at My Tupelo, a woman in Australia contacted me over Messenger, and she was helping me do on the doll. And her husband came up to her and said, why don't you, get off the computer and come out and have a smoke with me? And so she said, good idea. They went out into the garage. We're standing there talking about Harold. And she was saying that there were lights that lit up the garage, but it was in front of them. And this is very important. Lights were in front of them on the other side of the car they were standing, on the other side of their car that they were standing next to. While they're standing there talking about Harold, she said this enormous black figure appeared like a shadow person. But, again, the lights were in front of them, and it wasn't behind them. So they were literally seeing this black figure on the other side of the car blocking out the lights that were lighting the garage. She looks at her husband, and she says, you see that? He said, I do. He pulled out his phone to take a picture of it. She said it darted to the left, to the other side of the garage. He snapped off a picture, which she never sent me, unfortunately, because she literally stopped talking to me after she told me the story. After he snapped off the picture, and I was telling this to the producer, I said, I just found out about this yesterday. And I said, I'm telling you this to let you know that this is real. He screamed and grabbed his left arm. She immediately thinks he's having a heart attack. She said, "Are you okay?" And he screamed, "No, it feels like my left arm is being yanked out of its socket." Well, if you look at recent pictures of the doll, you'll see that the left arm is just barely hanging on. And I told this guy, that's what we're dealing with here, which is why Zach mentioned when he got the bruises on his left arm that I had mentioned something about, and I did. I said, please be careful because the left arm is really fragile. So, yeah, I'm telling him stories like this, okay? And they come up with this nonsense they came up with. And then Serena, who was the medium they used on the show in Mexico City, said something about 5 spirits being in the doll. And I blurted out, what a load of crap. And I'm cleaning it up. Mm-hmm. What a load of crap. I only know about 1 spirit. Where's she getting 5? This is ridiculous kind of thing, right? And this plays into this whole thing. So after it was all said and done, of course, I got all kinds of emails, hate emails, you know, what are you trying to do, sell the doll? What a bunch of nonsense. And I'm like, whatever. So again, she mentions 5, and I'm thinking, you know, there's no way there's 5. She's talking about a crazy woman. You know, I don't know about any crazy woman. But pieces started falling into place. For example, and I don't know if she's listening or not. I seriously doubt it because she wants as little to do with this as possible, with the doll as possible. My friend Mary Ann, who lives in Erie, and I were talking. The show came on Saturday night. We were talking Wednesday because she said something on Facebook about having a Herald party Saturday night. So I called her. I said, are you really having a Herald party? She says, oh, yeah, a bunch of my friends are coming over and going to watch the show. And I was laughing, and we just talked about things in general. She called me 2 days later, and that night, Wednesday night, she was asleep. She is a grandmother in her 50s, lives alone. She was fast asleep when she said she heard a little boy, which sounded like a little boy to her, scream out her name, Mary Ann. She said she sat up, thinking it was one of her grandchildren, looked around, and was like, what? Kind of thing. Got up, looked around, couldn't find the source of the voice, went back to sleep. The next night, Thursday night, she woke up again when she heard her name screamed out again, but this time it was a woman, and she said the intensity of her anger and hatred literally made her jump so hard that her bed shook. She got up, walked around looking for this woman, and stood out in the balcony, afraid to go back into her apartment until the sun came up. And the whole time she kept thinking, I need to tell Anthony. I need to tell Anthony. I need to tell Anthony. And so she calls me and asks me if I thought it had anything to do with the doll. She calls me on Friday. I said, I don't know. I've never heard of any woman or any child with the doll. And then Serena comes out with, you know, there are 5 spirits. One of them's this crazy woman. And I thought, whoa. So anyway, my whole point of even allowing Ghost Adventures crew to have the doll was, you know, they have all this great equipment from like Bill Chappell and all this stuff. And I thought, finally, you know, I'll get some clues as to what's going on with the doll. Hopefully some verification on Erica's reading, which I did not tell him about. And then the show came out, and I was, with all due respect to the boys, just completely disappointed, but I thought that's television. And I thought, I'm just going to do my own investigation. I literally spent like $2,000-3,000 buying equipment to do my own investigation on it. And I was doing my own investigation, and in this YouTube channel we talked about that I have up, you see what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And at one point I even have this show, the television Island of Dolls episode, going on in one of them, and I'm still trying to figure out what the hell is going on with the doll. Well, the double-edged sword to this was that it got exposure, which, you know, I knew it was going to get. It got negative exposure, which I knew it was going to get. But again, I was hoping to find out something more than I knew. But it literally led to me discovering the truth about the doll. So do I regret having it on the show? Yeah, because, again, they spread a lot of nonsense about it. But people started contacting me, unbeknownst to one another, telling me things that were corroborating each other's stories. And that's how I eventually came to find out what the truth is behind the doll. And it's much scarier than anything I could have ever made up in my little imagination. And the really scary part is that it's all true. And we can talk about that if you'd like.
Oh,
what I learned and some of the things that had happened.
We better
well,
talk
let me give
about
you an example.
What's truth. And just so you know, for the next time, just get airfare to and from Vancouver, British Columbia. We have my Canadian Paranormal Society has all that equipment too. So it would have been a lot cheaper. We got the Bill Chapel.
I would have known. I wouldn't have spent that money.
Stickman
I bought a REM pod. I bought everything. I started watching those shows again just to see what they were using.
We got the thing that does the connect the dots, like that makes the Stickman. Yeah, we got those things.
Really?
Oh,
yeah. See, that's what I was hoping they would do with the doll.
Well, come up next time, and we'll meet you in Victoria, where all hell breaks loose anyway. So, yeah, that's what I was hoping for. In all honesty, I bought an infrared camera, like the full spectrum video camera, whole 9 yards. But what happened was, it was interesting as I was starting to use that stuff. Like, I no longer got EVPs. I, wasn't capturing anything on the infrared or the full spectrum camera. The REM pod would work sporadically, then it would stop working at all. But what happened was, for instance, a guy named Larry, who lives up in the Baltimore, Maryland area, contacted me shortly after the show aired. And all this is in my book, by the way. And I provide all kinds of pictures, all kinds of evidence to show you, I'm not making this stuff up. Anyway, he saw the Ghost Adventures episode, had never heard anything about Harold the doll. All of a sudden became intrigued and, by his own admission, obsessed by the doll. And then found my YouTube videos. And one night thought to himself, and I actually created something on Facebook, and I said, I'm looking for help here. If there's anybody who can offer me any help at all, I'm open to hearing from you. And he thought to himself, I wish there was some way I could help Anthony. Well, he was, apparently, as far as I know, still is an insomniac. And the night he said that, he went to bed, and his 3-year-old son was laying in bed at that time, fast asleep with his wife. And so he got into bed, and he was laying there thinking about Harold, closed his eyes, tried to sleep, when he saw a terrified woman in front of, like a vision of a very terrified woman in front of him. He opened his eyes, she was gone. He closes his eyes again, and there she is, and this time there's a child with her that looks like a little boy. He opens his eyes, they're gone, closes his eyes again, and now a man with a badly burned face appears in front of both of them with this sneer on his face. He opens his eyes, they're gone, he closes them, and the guy is still staring at him with the sneer on his face, and the woman is reaching out to him. The woman he first saw is reaching out to him. And all of a sudden he saw this huge muscular arm come out of nowhere. And he said this whole thing was happening in a fog. This whole thing, this whole vision was happening in a fog. This huge muscular arm with long fingers and long nails reaches out, snatches the two, and he said there were other figures in the back. He couldn't make out what they were. And throws them, hurls them back into the fog. And this guy looked at him with this look of mind your own business, the one with the burned face.
So I asked him, can you draw me a sketch of what you saw? And he said, well, I'm not an artist, but I'll do the best I can. So he drew a sketch, and he sent it to me, and he said, you know what? This is nowhere close to what I saw, so I'm going to hire a sketch artist that I know to make a better sketch for you. And I said, okay, fine. Well, he sends me the sketch artist sketch, which again is in the book, along with his drawing is in my book. And right around the same time that was going on, I was talking to him, and I wasn't telling anybody anything about what he was saying, anything about the drawings, none of that, because, one, I didn't know whether to believe him or not. I mean, I'm not saying he was lying. I just didn't know what to make of what he was saying. A friend of mine in New Mexico, I was telling her that another woman in Australia, and Australia plays a huge part in this whole story, said that she drew a picture of Harold and, sent me a picture of it on Facebook and asked me if I wanted it. And I said, sure, I'll take it. And she says, all right, well, I want $70 Australian for it.
Yeah, okay.
I started laughing. I was like, you're nuts. Well, I was telling my friend Melanie, who happens to be an artist, about this, and she said, I'll draw a picture of Harold for you if you want. It's like, fine. I just thought this was a funny story.
That's weird.
So she sat down to try to draw the doll and said she couldn't for a couple of weeks. Finally, after Christmas time, she was able to sit down and draw the doll, but what she drew was not the doll. What she drew was a demon-looking figure with horns and the whole 9 yards, with his arm around a woman and 2 children, and then there was a black cloaked figure in there as well. Now, keep in mind that Dave saw a black cloaked figure the first time I talked to him, and I didn't tell him about that sketch.
Yeah, like you and I talked about that off air, but we haven't brought it up on air yet. Tell the listener a little about that.
Well, it's the first time I was talking to Dave, and I told him, which I didn't tell you because you had brought it up when we were talking off the air. I said, Dave, I've got to warn you that this energy, if you know about it, it knows about you, and it probably won't like us talking about it. And it, I don't know what's going to happen. I said, don't be surprised if we keep getting cut off. That's where I left it. I said, don't be surprised. It's a warning I give most of the people I do interviews with that something may happen. Well, he's talking, and all of a sudden he starts panicking, and he said, Anthony, I saw him moving out of the corner of my eye, and I looked, and there was this there's this cloaked figure. I can't remember if he said it was black or brown, like robe on it with a hood, that was like standing there looking at him. And for the rest of the show, he was literally looking over his shoulder. His wife came in at one point during a break, looked at him and said, what in the world happened? Because apparently all the blood had left his face, and the poor guy was genuinely terrified. And I said, Dave, I tried to warn you. I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought, we just keep losing contact with each other. But so she draws this, and she said, I kept trying to draw the doll itself, and I couldn't draw the doll. All I could draw was this. So there's this, again, dark cloaked, hooded figure. And I said, well, who's that? She said, that's Harold. And I said, well, okay then. Now we've got this dark cloaked figure. We've got the young girl or the young woman, 2 kids. If you're keeping tally here, that's 4. Yeah, and now the demon, there's 5, which is exactly what Serena was talking about. When Larry told me about his vision, he talked about seeing 5 figures in the fog. And honest to God, my first thought was, they were influenced by this woman on the show. But then when I looked at Melanie's picture, her picture looked a lot like, as far as the figures go, the woman and the 3 children, the woman and the 2 children, they looked a lot like the woman and one of the children that Larry saw in his vision. And I began to think, what the heck is going on? Well, right around the same time, I was contacted by yet another woman, whom in my book I call Jane, not her real name. And she was telling me, and this all happened within like 2-3 weeks of each other. She was telling me that she had a son, 6-year-old son, who is severely autistic, and she wanted to get a service dog for him. So they're having a fundraiser to try to raise money for this dog. And she'd gone onto YouTube to try to learn how to make stuffed toys. And on YouTube, she saw a video about Annabelle, right? Because Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll. She saw one of those little clips off to the side. So she's watching the video about Annabelle and, kind of freaking out a little bit. And off to the side, she saw the clip for Virtual Insanity's video of Harold. And she said, I was drawn to this doll. She said, that's the only way I can describe it. I had to look at a video of this doll. So she's watching the video. She doesn't remember what happened, but she remembers being interrupted. She thinks her husband came home. So she paused the video. She was watching it on her iPad. Excuse me. She paused the video, went about her business, forgot all about, Harold. Didn't give it a second thought. Her son comes home from school, asked if he could watch Reading Apples or something along those lines on her iPad. She said, sure. She turns on her iPad, and there's the picture of Harold on there. And her little son, she said, did a double take, which she said for him being autistic was extremely unusual. So that struck her as odd. And he said, Mommy, the baby is scared. And she said, what baby? And he said, the one inside the doll. And just like all these other mothers had told their kids, she said, it's just an old doll. And just like the other kids had said, he said, no, Mommy, the baby is scared. It wants to come into the sunshine, but it can't. And its mother is very sad because she wants to help it come into the sunshine, but the black cloud won't let it.
Wow.
And she said, I just thought I'd tell you this. She had no clue as to who the doll was, anything like that. And she found out I owned it. So she sent me a thing on Facebook Messenger. And I wrote her back and I said, I've heard stories about children reacting that way to the doll. Do me a favor. If he says anything else, let me know. And then I wrote, by the way, are you a fan of Ghost Adventures or you watch the show? And she wrote back, no, what is that? I said, it's a television show. She says, I've never seen it. She says, I'm not into this sort of thing. And I said, are you sure you've never seen it? Nope, never seen it. Anyway, I think it was like a week or two later, she contacted me again. And she had taken Vincent to art therapy. And the therapist was talking to him about feelings and asked him to, paint what his feelings look like. Well, he painted this thing, which I have in my storage unit along with the doll. And again, there's a picture of it, not only on the internet, but it's in my book. And he painted what looks like a black sea urchin. It's the only way I can describe it, with 2 red eyes and 4 white stars. And the art therapist said to him, what's that? And he said something along the lines of, it's what the thing on my mummy's iPad wants. And he looked at him, and she's watching this through a two-way mirror. And, he looks at her, through the mirror. She he can't see her, but he looks at the mirror. But neither of them know what to say. So she writes to me and tells me about that. And I said, can you send me a picture of it? She said, well, the art therapist still has it, but as soon as he gives it to me, I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. So she did. And then a week later, she said that Vincent put it on their kitchen table and refused to touch it. And every time he looked at it, he kept telling his mother, Uncle Ant. He started calling me Uncle Ant. Uncle Ant needs to have that. Uncle Ant needs that. And she said, I don't know why he's on about this, but he keeps insisting, would you like the painting? And I said, please send it to me. So she did. Then she just started messaging me about all the things that were happening to her son, and he would make drawings, and just weird things started happening. At one point, she went to check in on him while he was sleeping. She said he opened his eyes, turned his head, looked at her, and said, be careful. But it wasn't his voice.
Oh, wow.
Totally freaked her out. Then he started insisting on watching more videos that I had, and started telling her about the black cloud, the black thing, and how it was keeping children trapped inside the doll. And he first started talking about, I need to help to get them into the sunshine. But then he started saying Uncle Ant needs to help them get into the sunshine. Well, this whole time I didn't know what to think of this. I mean, he's an autistic child. She says, I have to tell you, because of his autism, he has no imagination. He can't lie. Everything is black and white to him. She explained that he was taking swimming lessons. His coach said to him, Vincent, you're on fire. He screamed, jumped out of the pool, thinking he was literally on fire. That's how literal this young boy is. So we just kept, messaging, because she's in Australia. And we kept messaging back and forth. And again, he started looking at videos. And then she said he would go into what she called a trance. And he would just stare blankly, and he would start talking in a voice that wasn't his own. And she sent me a couple of videos that she managed to take of it, and it was actually quite scary. Well, around the same time all this was happening, I was talking to Larry. And again, I didn't tell Larry about Jane in Australia. I didn't tell Larry about Melanie in New Mexico. I didn't tell Jane about Larry or Melanie. I didn't tell Melanie about Jane or Larry. None of them knew about each other, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to Larry on the phone, and I was asking him about his original picture. I was asking him to actually send me a copy of his original picture. And he said, I don't think I have it anymore, but I do have it on my phone. I'll print out a copy of it for you if you'd like. I said, please do. I want it for my records. So he pulled it up on his computer.
Okay, we are gonna hold that thought.
Okay.
We got the picture coming up on his computer. We're going to take our last break of the evening. A little nice 7 minutes coming up to the top of the hour here, and we'll come back with more about Harold the haunted doll and and the adventures of Anthony Quinata, who is trapped with this thing, I think. It's amazing, Anthony, what you've gone through. Absolutely amazing. Again, we're going to be right back with more. It gets crazier. It's going to get crazier? Okay.
It gets crazier, I promise you.
Buckle up, everybody. We'll be back right after this.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I would like to invite you to listen Monday through Friday right here on Spaced Out Radio. 3 hours a night of the top stories with the top guests, ranging topics from UFOs to ETs, ghosts to Sasquatch, and everything in between. We are live every night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. So come on in and take a listen at spacedoutradio.com. Spaced Out Radio will take you out of this world.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on 2 mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. 2 mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for news beyond the mainstream news? Head to spacedoutradio.com and check out the SOR Spacewire. This is Spaced Out Radio's Eric Markham, News Director for the SOR Spacewire. Daily, I will bring you intriguing stories and outlandish reports from what's going on around the world. UFO sightings, paranormal activity, conspiracies, alternative health, and so much more. And if you have news, email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where 2 members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio.
For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews. Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Webster Small, and I'm here to bring you the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night, live at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. If you're looking for aliens and extraterrestrials, well, we've got them. Big and tall, short and small. You're bound to find what you're looking for, so join me on the Webster Phenomena right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Hi there, this is Jolene with Reveal Reiki and Readings, and I want you to relax. Let me help you chill out and get in touch with your body, mind, and soul. In this busy world, sometimes we need to let go, and this is where I can help. Visit my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/Rivulet R&R, or my Facebook page, Rivulet R&R, to set up an appointment for relaxation, Reiki, or readings, no matter where you are. It's time for you to make time for you.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
Tonight's edition of Spaced Out Weekend is brought to you by spacedoutradio.com, where you can now sign up to become a Space Traveler member. Now, for the final time tonight, here's Spaced Out Weekend's James Tyson.
Oh, quit talking. So, I'm talking over top of the Freedom Slips Revolution Radio fellow telling you that whatever we talk about on our show really isn't affecting them at all. So they're going to carry on with their little drizzle of a commercial for a couple of seconds, and now it's gone. And I'm back with Anthony Quinata. Anthony, before the break, we were talking, you were just leading us through, was it Larry opening it up? Yes. Opening the photograph up on his computer?
Right. He had it up on his computer because he was going to print out a copy of the original drawing he made. He had apparently destroyed the original, but he had a copy on his computer. And so we were talking about it. It was, again, on his computer screen when his, at the time, 3-year-old son, and this was a couple of years ago, came up and said to him, while I'm on the phone with him, "Daddy, why did you draw my friend?" And I'm getting the chills again, just recounting the story. Larry says, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah. Ask him, to point at his friend in the picture." And he said to his son, "Who's your friend?" And his little 3-year-old son pointed at the man with the burned face. And he says, "Oh my God, he's pointing at the guy with the burned face that I drew." And I said, "Are you okay?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Would you do me a huge favor?" He said, "What's that?" I said, "Ask him what his friend's name is." And he says to his son, he says his son's name. He says, "What's your friend's name?" And I hear this little voice say, "Harold." And he's just like, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Yeah. Ask him if he sees his friend." And he said, "Do you see your friend?" And his little son said, "Yeah, he's in my bedroom right now." The phone drops. I hear footsteps running away. He comes back, picks up the phone, sheer panic. He says, there's nobody in there. He told me later on that his son was upset. He asked him why he was upset. And he said, Harold's mad. I told you about him. And so, again, this is all going on right around the same time. Melanie gets back to me and says she's driving on this road. She has a vision, and she's going to make a thing for me, a picture for me of the vision she had. And she was going to send it to me. And again, the second thing she did was the original cover of my book, Harold the Haunted Doll, which I'm going to explain in a little bit. Isn't really haunted. I'm going to explain why I say that and why I chose to use that title, even though I knew it wasn't quote-unquote technically haunted. But in her vision, she had, again, a horned figure with its arm around a cage, and in the cage was a young woman and two children, and, again, a black cloaked figure, or a black figure that was manacled to the bars. And her explanation of it was that the, quote, demon, which I didn't believe in, was keeping these three children in this jail, in this cage, and the black figure manacled to the cage could go anywhere in the world it wanted, but it only did it to serve the demon. And again, there's a picture of that whole thing in my book. Now, so I've got Larry and his son telling me about, or his son, talking about Harold, whom Larry never told his little 3-year-old son for fear of scaring him. I've got Melanie talking about this. And I've got Jane telling me things that are going on with Vincent in Australia, which became almost a daily occurrence. He started talking about the black cloud, the black thing. He had several names for it. And he started acting out in school. At one point, he said some name. She asked me about it. And I said I didn't know. I did some research. And another guy, a radio show host, Chuck Gotsky, was helping me to research it. And we both thought we found out what it was. We both thought it was a castle in Scotland. And I asked Jane to ask Vincent to draw what he was talking about. And he drew a castle. And I wrote to Jane, I said, I know this castle. I sent her a picture of the castle Chuck and I found. And I know we were thinking the same thing as I'm looking at the picture that Vincent drew, looking at this castle. They're not the same thing. But then I saw what he wrote on his picture, and I Googled that name that he wrote, and there was that castle.
Interesting.
Exactly as he drew it. Now, people said, well, obviously he Googled it. Well, at this point, he's 7 years old. Either he Googled it or his mother did.
But why?
At that point, she was in such a panic. There was no reason for her to do that. So anyway, he literally started getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and he started drawing these crazy pictures, some of which I include. I think I have like 23, 24 pictures in my book, several of them coming from Vincent himself. Around the same time all this was happening, two, which he thought were crows, were showing up at Vincent's window, pecking at the window, trying to break it. she said more than once they would knock themselves, they'd become loopy from this. And it got to the point that Vincent refused to sleep in his room. And literally, by the time this is all over, they were all sleeping in the middle of and they lived in a huge house. Sleeping in the middle of the house, they were all so afraid. And the first time this started happening, and subsequent times to that, whenever these crows would show up and start pecking at Vincent's window, I wouldn't tell her this, but as she's telling me about, these crows showing up, I'd take holy water and I would spray it on the doll. And I would say, what's going on now? She'd say, they just flew off onto the fence 600 meters away. And I think, close but not good enough. So I'd spray the doll with holy water again. And, she'd be talking, not knowing what I was doing. She'd be messaging me, telling me everything else that's going on. And then I'd say, where are the crows now? She'd say, well, now they flew off into a tree. I'd hit it again. She says, I can hear them, but I can't see them. And every time they show up, I wouldn't tell her. I would just spray the doll with holy water and say, if you're behind these crows, then I want you to make them leave. And they would leave. And I thought, wow, this works. Come to find out, they weren't crows. They were ravens. And a friend of mine who's into Native American spirituality and old Celtic ways and all that other good stuff told me that she was one of the editors of my book, told me that ravens were harbingers of death. That's what they were bringing, messages of death. Another time, and I've got all kinds of incidents I write in the book, another time, little Vincent was hiding under his desk in school and crying, and his teacher asked him what was going on, and Vincent handed her a drawing, which is just incredibly intricate. Again, it's in my book, and it shows this, I don't know how to describe it other than to say it's like a black dog or a black wolf with red eyes. And she said, what is this? And he said, that's what's in my bedroom scaring me. They kept calling her in and telling her, you shouldn't let him watch horror movies and stuff like that. And she's like, well, how do I explain what's going on to them? Anyway, it just got worse and worse and worse. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does she let him watch horror movies?
No, not at all. He has no interest in them. He watches Lego movies. He watches, Disney movies.
Yeah.
That
Disney
sort of
can
thing.
have some pretty dark stuff in those Disney things.
I don't know, Little Mermaid.
Yeah, that evil octopus woman.
You know what I'm saying?
Hey, does Vincent's mom or dad, is there any sensitives in his background?
No, none whatsoever.
So it's probably as a result of his autism.
Absolutely. And what's crazy is, and I name her in the book, so I'll go ahead and mention the name now. She was talking to him, and he one point said something about a woman named Lottie, and she asked him, who's Lottie, and is this the woman who is the mother to the children, or is she the one scaring him? And he laughed and said, no, Mommy, she sings me to sleep every night. Well, a very good friend of mine, Donna, who is a brilliant internet researcher and literally would find out things based on what he said, looked up the name Lottie to find out if it was associated with that castle. And sure enough, there's a woman. I have, pictures from newspapers and stuff like that. What he said was her real name is Charlotte, but wants me to call her Lottie. And one of the newspaper articles, it says Charlotte, and in parentheses, Lottie. That sort of crazy stuff was going on. So finally, at one point, I decided to do a quote-unquote binding ritual on the doll.
And what would a binding ritual do on the doll?
What I was hoping was that it would stop what was going on in Australia and other parts of the world because it wasn't just happening on Australia. I was hearing from people around the United States. I was hearing from people in Europe, Great Britain, Canada, South America, who were, writing to me. For instance, this one young lady, 16 years old, who knew nothing about the doll, nothing whatsoever, had a dream one night, and she said in this dream, she saw a demon, as she described it. And keep in mind, I had no faith or any sort of belief in the existence of demons. So when she wrote that, I rolled my eyes. She saw a demon, she saw a man, and she saw 4 people standing behind the demon and the man. And in her dream, she said, I thought there was only 5 people in Harold. And again, not knowing anything about the doll, she didn't know anything about Harold. And then the man with the burned face came up and glared at her and slammed, quote, the green door in her face. And said, basically mind your own business. And she said, who's the 6th person? And then she heard from the other side of the green door, his name is Anthony.
Huh.
Now here's the kicker. When I received that email, the doll was with me in another hotel, in the room with me in that hotel, and
the door was
my
green.
right hand to God, the hotel door was green.
Yeah. Interesting.
From that dream, she somehow found Harold and then found me. She somehow knew to look for Harold the doll.
That is wild.
And then, like she said, she's like, I don't know who you are, but she said, I just felt I had to warn you. And I would hear from people who would be like, I had this dream and I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to think I was nuts. And then they would tell me a similar dream to what she had. And I would say, how long ago did you have this dream? 4 months ago. Like I told you, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to think I was nuts. And again, all this stuff was going on. So I used holy water. I used blessed salt, stuff like that. And I still had the doll in the same bag. The suitcase, I don't know where it came from on Ghost Adventures, but the bag that Zach carried the doll into the shack that, and was given to me by Camille, who I talked about earlier. So I had the doll in this hotel room in this bag, and like I said, I used holy water, I used blessed salt, an image of St. Michael the Archangel and a crucifix, zipped up the bag, and for 2 weeks, Vincent was fine. And I thought, it worked. Thank God, it worked. All of a sudden, Jane sends me a video of Vincent running around holding his little PlayStation control. Apparently he was watching a movie on PlayStation, which is where he watches all his movies, is on PlayStation. And he's running around screaming at the top of his lungs, not again, not again, not again. No, please, not again. And I mean, it broke my heart. And I said, what's going on? And she wrote back, I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me. And I said, I can't imagine it has anything to do with the doll because I did this binding ritual. Apparently it worked. Well, he started again. All this time he would go into trances. Remember, he called April a bitch?
Yeah.
The first woman who... I've got EVPs of a male voice calling various psychic readers using that word, bitch, and then another word, cunt, okay?
With a
on
K.
EVPs. With a K.
Yes, because you're not supposed to say that word, so we always say it with a K.
There you go.
Yeah.
With a K. Well, little Vincent would become terrified, and then she would send me pictures of him, and it didn't look like him, where he'd hide in what we would call a walk-in closet behind the clothes. And then she'd come up to him, and he would scream at her, "Get away from me, you bitch." And this is a little 7-year-old boy. I said, "Do you use that language in your family?" She says, "No, not at all." And anyway, one time he was upset, and I told her how to calm him down using salt water and some herbs. I'm not a New Age person at all, but I had to find this stuff out on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote to me and said, "What is ABADON mean?" And I said, "I have no idea. Why don't you have him draw it?" So he drew this, again, sea urchin looking thing with red eyes. And then he drew ABADON and Apollyon, APPOLYON, on the same paper. And again, this picture of this drawing is in my book. And I said to her, "I don't know what Apollyon is, but I think the first word is abandon, because that's the only thing I could make sense of." So I Googled it, ABADON and APPOLYON, and it corrected me. And it was like ABADDON and then Apollyon. Abaddon and Apollyon. Abaddon is Aramaic. Apollyon is Greek for the same demon named in the book of Revelations, chapter 9. Now, I can tell you for a fact that they have 2 Bibles in their home, an adult Bible and a children's Bible. And if I were to put $100 US into both those Bibles, the only place they'd be safer is in a bank. The only difference is in a bank, they collect interest. They're not religious at all. I panicked when I, saw this, and I kept trying to make sense of it. And so then the next day after that, and I didn't even explain to her what this meant. She said, "Do you know what this means?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "What does it mean?" I said, "I don't want to tell you." Because I didn't want to freak her out. But I did suggest that she call a Catholic priest and go to a church to get some holy water. And so she went to this church, talked to a priest, and got some holy water. And then I told her to get a couple of other things, like a St. Michael medallion, St. Benedict medal, that sort of thing, and some sage. And I said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go throughout your house. And I want you to sage actually, I said, I want you to make the sign of the cross with the holy water, on the walls and windows. And then tell me what happens." When she comes back to me, she says, "Okay, I'm done." And I didn't tell her to sage it. She had no idea why she was even using the holy water. I said, "Tell me exactly what happened." She said, "Nothing really, except when I got to Vincent's room, it was a lot colder than the rest of the house, but it's been like that for months now." I said, "What do you mean a lot colder?" She said, "Well, I just thought it was because the trees outside shielded the sun, but it's just several degrees cooler than the rest of the house." And I said to her, "Call your priest friend and tell him what's going on, start to finish, and ask him for help." She called the priest, and he told him what was going on. He suggested she talk to somebody else. She talked to another guy. He came out, blessed her home, and everything calmed down. And I might actually have this out of order because it's been a while. Anyway, at one point after that, she took him to the Catholic church this priest was stationed at, and he came, and they went for a walk, and the priest bought him some ice cream and talked about what was going on, and then brought him back. And before the priest came to meet with Vincent, she brought him into the church. She said he became very fidgety and wanted to leave. And then when he came out, he was fine. Well, later on, he drew a picture of the church and he drew several things that looked like bright lights. And he said those are the people who were in the church. Well, according to her, there was nobody but him and her in the church at the time, so she doesn't know who he's referring to. But up above the church, in this drawing, he drew this black shape with horns and red eyes again, and like bat wings type of thing. Anyway, the bottom line, the whole thing, everything just sort of erupted all over again. At one point, they had horses, and she said they had a very heavy gate, which was extremely difficult to open, but it was found wide open and the horses were gone. She was out trying to get them back into the corral. She came back, and while she was gone, and again, everything had, calmed down, Vincent went into his bedroom to go get some books and started screaming bloody murder. His father ran in, and he had collapsed in the middle of the floor and was just screaming at the top of his lungs. His father couldn't figure out what was going on. The next day, Vincent told his mother that while he was in there, this black cloud thing reached out and touched him. So I asked her to have him draw what happened. And again, this drawing's in my book. There's his bedroom, and she sent me a picture of his bedroom. There's his bedroom. There's this black mass in the upper corner of the room. And on the floor, looks like what's a little girl. And I asked her to ask him, who this little girl was. It was this Lottie. And he said, "No, Mommy, it's the doll. They always come together." And that's when I realized that this black thing and the doll were separate. Does that make sense? I always thought everything was happening from within the doll, which would explain why after the binding ritual, all of this was going on. I still had no idea what the hell it was.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, "No, Mommy, they come together." And at one point, he said, "It's not a girl's doll, Mommy. He wants you to, how do you put it? It's not a doll, Mommy. He wants you to think it's a girl's doll, but it's not. It has a black heart." So when that happened, I told her to call that priest again. He came back out, and I said, "Tell him everything." And she said, "What's going to happen?" So I explained to her what I thought was going to happen. I said, "I don't know. Tell him everything. Don't know what to do." So these two priests came out. One of them was apparently a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and he did what I would call an intake with Vincent. Came back. These two priests talked to Vincent privately, came back, talked to Jane and her husband, and the one priest who was a psychologist, she didn't know what he was. He told her, but it just went over her head. He said, "Have you ever thought about putting him on medication?" She said, "Well, he's autistic." He's like, "Oh." And the other priest told this guy about his previous experiences coming out to bless the home. So they went out to the car, spent some time out in the car, came back. She said they had a bag, which I would assume is like an attaché case or something like that, filled with holy water, these laminated prayer cards, candles, and all this other stuff. Now, what's interesting is, before they actually got to the house, and this video is on YouTube, I did a vlog talking about how this priest, I didn't know there was going to be two, but the priest was coming back out to the house again, to do another blessing and whatnot. And I had a very heavy statue, about 3 pounds, St. Michael statue, sitting in front of the bag. And I did like 3 or 4 takes. And I would film these on my cell phone. And after about 3 or 4 takes, it's just like, what, there's something about this I don't like. And I thought, I know. It's the St. Michael statue. I'll move it over here to the middle of the bed, literally about 14 inches away from the edge of the bed because I didn't want it to fall. And I'll introduce it halfway through the video. So I have it sitting to my right by the headboard, good 14 inches, 16 inches away from the edge of the bed. And on the video, you see me talking and explaining. It's about 10 minutes before the priest showed up when I hear a sound, and I look over, and again, to clean it up, my first thought that went through my head was, holy crap. Between the bed and the nightstand, which is where the doll was, this statue was wedged in between the mattress and the nightstand, upside down, with such force it broke off one of the wings. And my first thought is, what in the world's going on? And again, this is on the video, and you can see it wasn't there because, I'm panning the whole 9 yards. Somebody suggested to me, somebody wrote to me and said, I wish you would have had, I wish you would have had a video showing this thing happening, insinuating that I had made it up. I'd done it myself, although everybody who watches it says you can see it wasn't me doing it. And then that was when I realized that night, thinking about it, I realized that something demonic, and that was the first time I ever used that word, was going on here. Well, after the priests were done, and I give an account as to what happened after the priest was done, Vincent went outside, and again, for a kid who was severely autistic, went outside and started playing with his next door neighbor and was singing and just having a good old time. And the next day, he went up to his mother and said, Mommy, thanks to the two superhero old dudes, the black thing can't hurt me anymore, but it just told me it wants to hurt Uncle Ant. And my life has been a living hell ever since. Now, again, I've left out, a number of different things, but that was when I started realizing that, yes, there's a demon involved, that the girl who saw the demon in her dream, Melanie who saw a demon in her vision, Larry who saw the vision he had, and by the way, based on the sketch that he sent me, actually the sketch artist did, I was able to identify who Harold really is. He's a man who did die as a result of a fire in World War II. And the other two figures in the vision Larry saw wasn't a woman and a boy, which he thought because of the haircut, but a young woman and one of her little sisters. Who were nieces to the guy who died from the fire. And I've got their names, I've got the address that the guy lived at when his house literally was set on fire from an aerial bomb during World War II, courtesy of Adolf Hitler. His wife is a woman named Lottie.
The one that was singing him to sleep.
Yes. His wife is a woman named Lottie. Everything started to fall into place. So that's why I now say, and I wrote this book, and I decided to call it Harold the Haunted Doll because that's the way it had been known for years. And it's a great, what is it called, keyword or whatever, for internet searches, as opposed to Harold the Doll. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You do an internet search, you put in haunted, and it comes up. But talking to a legitimate demonologist, he explained to me something really interesting, that objects can be haunted, but the activity is generally limited to 15 to 20 feet from the object, which is why you hear about all these haunted objects, so-called haunted objects in museums and causing havoc in and around the immediate area, Robert being an example, okay? However, he said, genuine demonic activity can happen anywhere in the world, miles and miles and miles away from where the trigger object is. And that blew me away.
Not only that, Anthony, but if you, some of the exorcists that I've spoken to, a demon can not only deal with something in Australia at the exact same time as it's dealing with something in the UK, at exactly the same time it's dealing with something in the year 2028, at the same time it's dealing with something in the year 1640, because time only is man-made.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. And just, all kinds of crazy things have been happening ever since then. So, I mean, it's still affecting me to this day. That's why earlier when you said, is it in a lead-lined box? Where is it? People ask you, why don't you put it in the museum? Why do you still have it is a real big question I get asked. Because I honestly believe that there are 4 souls, and at least 3 of those are innocent and need to be released from the doll. Once that happens, I'd love to see the doll go into some vault way underground, in the Vatican, to be honest with you. And I never see it again, to be very honest with you. I have no attachment to this doll. My only reason for continuing to have it is because I want to do whatever I can to release this girl and her 2 sisters.
Yeah.
Who
I
have a photograph of.
I often, or not often, but I'm now wondering what the burnt man had done in his life that made him so easily preyed upon by a dark entity.
I honestly believe, and I know his name. In fact, I showed Jane a picture of him. I said, I believe this is the man based on the sketch Larry gave me, who calls himself Harold. And her first reaction was, oh my God, he looks like a child molester.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe, because there's a man, his name is Kenneth Murray, he's a friend of mine in Massachusetts, who came to a class where I was asked to bring the doll. And all of a sudden he starts getting these impressions and hearing a voice, and he's doing automatic writing and all this other good stuff. And he confirmed for me my belief, without me saying anything to him, that this guy who calls himself Harold, by the way, who had a son named Harold, ironically enough, he and Lottie had a son named Harold, was either a Freemason or a part of a secret society. And he said, according to what he's heard, this guy was into very, very bad stuff in order to gain power. Speaking of exorcists, the class I brought this guy, or the doll, to where I met Kenneth, who's since become a friend of mine. The woman who was running the class knew a guy who claimed to be an exorcist. And he's like, it's a low-level demon, yada, yada, yada. One of the things I'm constantly asked is, well, if this really is a bad Apollyon, why would he give up his name? And I said, he didn't give up his name. I believe Lottie gave the name to Vincent to let him know so I would know what I'm up against.
And what's the demon's name?
Abaddon, Abaddon. If you look him up, he's in the Book of Revelations.
Yeah. Yeah, they do have to give you their name. It takes a while, but once they give you the name, people who deal with them, that's the first. You can go in there knowing the name, but when they give it to you, you know you've got it on the run.
Right. And, interestingly, I should say, not ironically, one of the reasons why this is the first radio show I've ever mentioned or stated the name on. But again, I heard from a man. Kenneth called me or wrote to me one day and said that Harold came to him, or apparently a Baden came to him, and said, Anthony has his helpers, I have my helpers too. But he called them meddlers, actually. The people who were helping me called them meddlers. And he said, I heard I'm going to deal with Dustin, and then after that, I'm going after Vincent. I almost said his real name. I'm going after Vincent. And I said, well, I know who Vincent is. I have no clue who the heck Dustin is. He says, well, I'm just telling you what I heard. And he actually wrote it out. He gave me the transcript of what he wrote. Well, a few days after he told me that, I get a message on Messenger, Facebook Messenger, from a guy who tells me he just got out of the ER. He wrenched his back. He had no idea how he did it. He wanted to know from me, as a quote-unquote psychic, what might have happened. And I'm thinking, why in the world is he contacting me? And who is this? And then I looked at the name of the guy who sent it to me. His name was Dustin.
Oh. There's the
connection. It was crazy. It was absolutely nuts. I bring this up because a few months later, he again wrote to me, and then I talked to him on the phone, and what he told me was that he had been having dreams, and from what I got from that whole thing was I was supposed to reveal the name of a Baden, and when I did reveal it publicly in my blog, on a vlog, and on Facebook, all the activity started dying down. So apparently going public with it, other than in my book, actually helped to lessen its power. But if I may go back to what I was going to tell you, this woman who was heading this class, this entire class started freaking out because you could literally feel the energy going up and getting in their faces. And there was, I think, 10, 12 people there. Well, she freaked out, called this guy. She had written a book about who supposedly is an exorcist. And he said, well, it's a low-level demon, yada, yada, yada. Tell Anthony I'll get rid of it. And then first thing that made him lose credibility with me was he told her to tell me to put the doll outside the house. It's like, right. This thing attacks people in the UK, Australia, Canada. Putting it outside the house, that's really going to help. Well, so I'm talking to her, and I hear this voice saying that he had actually sent Harold, and this guy had encountered Harold. And he, fell for it hook, line, and sinker. But if he tries to do what he thinks he's going to do, it was like, make no mistake about it, I will kill him. And I didn't pass that on because selfishly, I wanted it all to end. And I didn't really believe the threat, to be very honest with you. So I didn't pass it on. And she was telling me everything that was going to happen the very next night. And I said, yeah, go ahead. Well, right about that time, my stomach just started churning. And so I said, you know what, I'll call you back. I'll get back to you. I have to go to the bathroom here. So without, getting into too much information, I get into the bathroom, sitting on the toilet. I stand up, flush the toilet. And then next thing I know, I'm thinking, I'm in my bed laying on this nice soft pillow. I come to, I'm not laying on my bed. I'm laying against the tub, and I now have 3 cracked ribs. So that was my punishment for not telling this guy to back off. And I stood up, and I felt 3 what felt like metallic bands around my chest. So my first thought is, I wonder if I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I hear this voice saying, death would be much, I can't remember how to put it, but basically, death would be an easier way for me to go than what it had planned for me. And I'm telling you, James, on a scale of pain scale 0 to 10, the doctors ask you that.
Yeah.
Where's your pain? 0 to 10. I would have literally had to tell him a good 15, a solid 15. I talked to my friend, Donna, who as I mentioned earlier, was doing a lot of research for me. I asked her to call the young man upstairs from where I was staying in Massachusetts and have him come down. He came down, and I said, "You see that bag with the doll in it?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "There's a bottle of holy water in there. Just don't touch the doll. Just splash the doll with holy water." He did it, and I was hoping, and as soon as he did, the three metal bands disappeared. And that's when I knew that a band was behind this whole attack. And, it's just one of the lesser things that's happened to me since. I mean, literally, my life's been a wreck. And people constantly asking me, I was accused just a couple of days ago by a friend of mine who said, I've always known a doll possessed you. It's like, doll doesn't possess me. But I'm bound and determined to release those three souls that Melanie saw behind the cage. That's why I still have the doll.
It is fascinating. You're dealing with a demon that is, it's a destroyer. Some have said that he's actually an angel of God as opposed to Satan, and it's the angel that God uses to destroy things. It's like the stick in God's hand. And
there's a lot of speculation. I've read a lot of things like that, but it doesn't jive with what happened with the St. Michael statue. Yeah. I mean, literally that night, I still had the statue on the nightstand. I was laying there thinking about this whole thing, and I thought, there really is a demon. And that was the big F.U.
Yeah.
To God, to St. Michael, and to me. And then I got up, took that statue, put it in the bathroom, wrapped it in a towel, closed the door behind me, because I thought as easily as it took that thing and crammed it down to make a point, in between the bed and the nightstand, he could have easily hit me in the head and killed me. That's how heavy the statue was. And I thought, well, why didn't it? Because it would have proven that it was real. If, I'm holding this thing and all of a sudden they find me dead and they look at this video. Now, you asked earlier about pets.
They don't...
Go ahead.
They don't do that. They frighten you to a point. If you're of strong mind, if you're a person of deviance, let's say like the child molester was, that's an easy grab. If you're a child who was lost in death, like, do I go to the light? Do the light? Oh, come over here.
Right.
Come to me. And, while I've got one of the people in your family, you guys are going to come over here too. So it's not like they can kill, but they can make you do things over time. People with simple minds, they can make them do things. That's my understanding. Whether you're walking into traffic or talking to yourself and going lunatic-y, but it's that socially they'll condemn you. Like when you start saying I see things, I hear voices, socially you're kind of put in one of those special hospitals and no one's going to believe you.
I mentioned this to you before. I've lost tons of friends over this whole thing.
They're not real friends then.
Well, they're just scared. They're just afraid because they've had experiences and they want nothing to do with it. And here I have the doll. But you'd asked earlier about pets. At the time that happened, I had one pet. His name was Chance. And then a friend of mine killed herself, and she had Chance's brother, Bentley. So I ended up adopting Bentley after she killed herself, and I know she knew I would do that after she did that. So I had now Chance and Bentley, who look exactly alike, except for a couple of things. And I brought them with me to the East Coast, and there's a long story. which I haven't gone into, and I might write a second book about why I ended up in the East Coast. But I was in New Jersey staying at a friend's house while they were vacationing in Florida, and Chance kept getting out of the backyard. And I figured out how he was doing it, so I blocked everything off. And he still ended up escaping, and he came back a couple of hours later, and I could tell something was wrong. And even Vincent said to his mother, something's wrong with Chance, without me saying anything to them. He knew something was wrong with Chance. Anyway, a couple of days later, on a Saturday, I brought Chance to a vet who did an x-ray and found out that Chance's abdominal, his stomach, his intestines, were all up in his chest cavity crowding his heart because he had a herniated diaphragm. Normally that sort of thing happens if a dog or a puppy is born with a herniated diaphragm or he gets hit by a car. And the logical explanation, because Chance was over a year old, was that he got hit by a car, but she could find no evidence, no fractures, nothing, saying he had been hit by a car. So she suggested I take it to a hospital, which I did, and they wanted to perform surgery to the tune of $5,000, which I was willing to do, but they said we'll need to, watch him for 30 days. It's like 30 days. I'm supposed to go to Connecticut by the end of the week. Later on this week, and like Wednesday, the guy's like, don't worry about it, get him to Connecticut, have him get the surgery there, he'll be fine. Again, this is a Saturday.
Yeah.
I get back to the house that we're staying at, and I open the curtains in the front window, and the screen, the windows are open, and the two screens are covered black with flies. So I open the screen, close the window, they all leave. Open the window, close the screen, and within a minute or two, they're black with flies again. And I'm like, where in the hell are all these flies coming from? Go through it again, open the screen, close the window, they leave. Do this a third time. And, this time I leave the window's closed, and something tells me go look upstairs. So I go upstairs, and there's this window in the stairwell, and I go into the bathroom, and they're both covered with flies. So I go grab my camera and start videoing it. I said, for those of you who think I'm making all of this up, there's a lot of people who say that a sign of demonic activity are flies, fly infestation. And I said, So here you go, right? Well, in the window in the stairwell, I'm filming this thing. I put it up, and keep in mind, I've got all my films on my cell phone. Put it up, and this one young lady writes to me and says, what's that flash in the window across the way? It was in the attic window of the next door neighbor's house. I said, I have no idea. I didn't even know it was there until you mentioned it. So what she did, and what other people did, was they framed this flash, which took place literally like a second and a half. It was just almost looked like the sun coming out from behind the cloud and then going back behind the cloud again. It was that quick. And in that flash, and you can do this yourself because the video is up on YouTube, and I called it The Lord of the Flies. When they were freeze-framing this flash, you see apparitional figures in there. And it's like one after another, after another, after another. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 in a second and a half, where you see like a man wearing a hat. You see what looks like a dog. You see what looks like a child. And the craziest one is what looks like a stick figure with horns coming out of his head. Now, anybody who knows me would tell you, I don't know how to use a screwdriver, let alone special effects on my cell phone. So, and what happened was before I came home, while I was still at the hospital, I was still examining Chance. I said, I wondered if Abaddon was behind this. And to me, these flies were like saying, yeah, I killed your dog. And it was the day after. What happened to Chance was the day after I submitted my book, Harold the Haunted Doll, to Amazon to be published and put online. And I figured it was punishment for what I did. And for a brief second there, literally, as I was collecting a box to put Chance in to take to the vet to get cremated, I said, you win. I'm done. I'll leave you alone. Then I thought, then Chance's passing is for nothing. But here's where it gets crazy. Remember I told you about Larry and his young son? Shortly after Chance passed, Larry contacts me on Facebook, and one of these days I'm going to have to do a video with a real camera and the whole 9 yards, like a documentary, showing these people talking about their stories. And he was saying that his son, who was 3 years old again at the time, was laughing and rolling around and playing on the floor. And he said, you know, what are you doing? And his son looked at him. He said, I'm playing with the puppy. He said, what puppy? He said, the puppy in the light. And, you know, he couldn't see anything. And later on, about 4 hours later, his son was, you know, laughing and giggling again. And he said, are you playing with the puppy again? He said, yes. And all of a sudden, his son turned around and looked at him, but looked at his legs. And he said at that moment, he felt a cold nose press up against his leg and then fur rubbing up against his leg. He looked down and he saw this light, you know, next to his leg that ran into his son's bedroom. And his son had refused to go into his bedroom for about a week or two, saying that Harold was scaring him, was angry at him. And he said he watched that light go into his son's bedroom. It got really bright and then disappeared. And at that moment, his son said, Daddy, I want to go into my bedroom and get my toys. The puppy said it's okay. And then later on, his son said, can we go to this pet store? And he's like, why? We got everything we need for the snakes and stuff. He says, no, I want to get some things for my new friend, the puppy. And he said, what does the puppy look like? And his son described Chance to a T. So much that Larry got 11 pictures of dogs that, you know, had the brown and black markings, except for one dog, which was like a grayish color. And he put Chance at number 7, and he was showing his son these pictures. And he says, is that your friend? Nope. Is that your friend? Nope. Is that your friend? And then he got to Chance, and his son said, that's my friend. That's Champ, not Chance. He called him Champ. And then he went through the other, you know, 3 or 4 pictures, and he's like, nope, nope, nope. He did it again, got to number 7. He said, that's my friend. That's Champ.
Because, that's probably what he heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know, in his little 3-year-old mind. And then Vincent's younger brother in Australia started talking to Jane. His younger brother was, I think, 4 at the time, or 5. Started talking to Jane about the new puppy that just showed up at their house and would sit in front of Vincent's bedroom door protecting Vincent.
Wow.
And, you know, his mother said, you know, what's his name? Champ.
You know, I've got to ask you something, and it's something that stuck in my mind when you first said it. Why did you call, you were talking about taking pictures of all the flies. Why did you use the term Lord of the Flies?
Just the book.
The book? Well,
yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with a demon called Beelzebub.
I've I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah, because, it's also in a Queen song. He is referred to as the Lord of the Flies.
Oh,
he's
I didn't know
extremely
that.
small. He's a fly. When you get a mass of flies around something, that's a sign that Beelzebub is in the area.
I just learned something new.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's what I was curious
Wow.
why you used the term the Lord of the Flies, because he is the demon Beelzebub is called the Lord of the Flies.
I had no clue.
He's one of the seven. If you're a Catholic in Christian demonology, he's one of the seven princes of hell. And
Right.
according to views, the Catholic views on hell too, describes him as a demonic fly who is known as the Lord of the Flies. And yeah,
It just because of the flies and because of the book and because of Baden being a prince of hell, I just came up with that.
Yeah.
But I had no idea about Beelzebub being referred to as the Lord of the Flies.
We were doing a paranormal investigation in a residential school where Catholic priests were very, very bad to the children in the school. A lot of sexual abuse and murder of these children. And we were in one of the rooms and we looked up and there was flies started to congregate all over the window. So we just said, you know what? Let's move on. We'll keep going. So, yeah, it's because there was always something we know that was holding the priest back because he thought he was going to burn in hell if he crossed over. And my impression is that he was hearing another voice saying, no, don't listen to them about crossing over. You have to stay here with us. And I think that voice was not of human.
Yeah. I'm still learning, about the powers that this thing has, whatever the hell it is. I mean, I hear from people I hear a lot of crap. I hear a lot of nonsense. I hear a lot of things I don't believe. But the things that are credible and in my own personal experience, I mean, it just continues to blow me away.
Yeah, it is. And you've been really good to stay up for 3 hours and talk about this.
So, has it been 3 hours?
It has.
My gosh,
it's time to go. And I really, I want to thank you very much, Anthony, for sharing your story with us. And it's amazing what you've endured to try to come to some kind of a conclusion with what's surrounding this doll. And your books are out there. You've do you have one book called Communications from the Other Side, or is that a DVD?
No, that's one of my books.
One of your
books? The other one is called We Are Never Alone.
Yeah.
Actually, Communications is like how I discovered that I am a medium, but I talk about discovering it, doing investigations. It was kind of funny. I still think of myself as a drunk who was in denial because everybody saw me, quote, talking to dead people. And I was just like, I don't believe in psychics. So.
I have so many guests like you. It's nice to have you all together in a room and you all look at each other and go, oh, I'm not crazy. You're crazy.
That's it.
So you can go, actually, you have your own website, Anthony Quinata. Now it's QUIN QUATA. Yeah, .com. Anthony Quinata.com.
And then I also have, I can't remember. I mean, there's like Haunted Harold Doll, I think is the address for my blog. And then I have the YouTube videos. And you see me progressing. I mean, I was just putting them up as I was learning it. And I haven't been talking about it lately, simply because, again, we've gone to our neutral corners. And in a couple of months, I'm hoping to have this whole thing resolved. But then again, I think it's well, here it's now Friday. I'm sure it's there Friday. Tomorrow, I don't know what's going to happen.
Well,
but
we'll
see.
We're going to come back and keep looking, keep checking on you.
There you go.
The next time I'm sure Dave will come back. I know we've got a little bit of overtime tonight, but we can't go too much overtime. People who are in the chat room, they're saying, yay, overtime, please, overtime. Got to remember, Anthony's been here for 3 hours, and well, I know you people asking for the overtime are on the East Coast, but anyway, thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you. I'm sorry I dominated most of 99% of it.
But perfect.
Read the book, because I left a lot out.
We will.
Read the book and then decide. That's all I ask people to do.
This is our last goodbye. Young hearts will stop. Torn souls set free. All that we have is now. If this is what you want, then come to me.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey! Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go. What are those voices? Look over the mountains. Because somebody died, somebody better hide on through the hill, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. And forget yourself. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done, throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after now. Run through the hill like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done, throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after. No!
I see dead people.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Dave's not here!